So what is a Rump session? I had to look it up. I wasn't sure. I know I've gone to conferences and late in the evening a bunch of people got together and had some discussions about, you know, what actually happened. And sometimes they even get a little aggressive and the moderators need to do something about it. So I like definition number 3 off the web. It's a less formal additional meeting at the end of the main conference. It can be 5 people waiting for the bus outside, talking about what they actually learned. And it says that it can be in various fields, especially if they're dynamically growing. Typically, some comments on general state of the field and maybe some jokes. So I thought that's good. But you had to get down to the 3rd definition online. So a little bit more about me, because I'm going to have biases in what I'm going to tell you, and this will help you decode what my bias is. So I was CTO for Spectrophysics and had my 40th anniversary there. Then I convinced them to pay me less money and make me come in less, starting 2 months ago. And they gave me a new title. I asked for it because everybody in academia knows what emeritus is. Nobody in our company knows. So I negotiated a new title, Emeritus Fellow. And then fortunately, I stood for election for Vice President of Optica this year. I'm President-elect. That means I get to be President next year. So I have multiple hats, and I'm going to try and decode for you when am I using my Spectrophysics MKS hat, and when am I just talking out of the Optica side of my mouth. So I am one of you. I went to school here in Rochester. You saw yesterday that the Institute started in 1929 with the hiring of actually 3 faculty, one of whom was Rudolph Kingslake. I actually learned my lens design from Rudolph Kingslake. I graduated when I was 4. Or something like that. But I'm really not one of you. So what did I do the last 4 decades? I really made lasers. And the mirrors in lasers, of course, are rather simple things. The coatings may be hard. So we've spent all our time thinking about designing coatings and converting to diode pumping and nonlinear optics to make other colors. Really not much optical design. People would occasionally come to ask me about coma, but that was the extent of my using my Kingslake training. But I am a customer, so I'm going to talk a little more about being a customer and potentially a future customer for more things. And of course, I have my cousins at Newport, who you got to hear from Rob earlier today. They're also part of the MKS family. So what is my goal before you? I'm not standing between you and beer, but I am standing between you and a tour. That's not an enviable place. I want to give you a few words of wisdom with my biases, maybe a few things to take home. That's what a Rump session is supposed to be. And I want to define a new set of units for measuring energy. You didn't expect that. And I'm going to call it the Jose. And my goal for today is to get up to half a Jose if I can. I think several speakers actually got above half a Jose during the last 2 days.
1.5.
That's pretty impressive. So the good news about going at the end is you can make slides the night before, even though you shouldn't really have a bunch of food and drinks. So Reinhard yesterday left us with the closing one, that it's not the features that we should be worried about, but the value to the customer. But we didn't really go on and talk about the customer. So that will be my first topic before we open up a couple of discussion topics. So a little bit about voice of the customer. If you go online and look, the first 20 hits you get are all about consumer products and asking customers what they want and doing surveys and having focus groups, and that's not us. And so I have a few other things to tell you about the voice of the customer in our optics world. And remember, I'm mostly used to customers buying lasers, but at least it's optics things. One is that often people come to us and to you, and they've already half solved the problem, and they want to know, can you make this or that? And we had this discussion a bit earlier. So one thing you have to do is you have to decode what problem are they really solving, and how many assumptions have they already made that have narrowed down your solution space? And people hit on some of that before, but it's an encouragement that when the customer comes and tells you something, and again, customers can't live with them, can't live without them, you have to take what they say. They're always right, except for sometimes not. And so you have to really figure out what assumptions are embedded. Customers don't always know what they need. You all know that, but this is something to remind everybody about. And sometimes they have pain points, and you should try and understand them. So a couple ways to try and decode the voice of the customer when, as presented, isn't necessarily what you need. So I had the pleasure of going to an Optica career accelerator, 75 late-stage PhDs, a few early career people from 25 countries, And one of the speakers who's done all 4 of them, Kenneth Barber, master's from U of R, works at Edmond, challenged all of the students. He put up this triangle and he said, you have time, you have cost, performance, or quality. Everybody get out your napkin, everybody write down the triangle, everybody pick the one that's most important. And of course, it's a trick question because it depends. But he warned us that customers usually say all of them. And of course, that can't really be the answer, but you can't just take that at face value. So he gave an interesting technique, and I liked it. He called it the 20% rule. That is, you should ask them, what if I'm 1 month late? What if it costs 20% less? Does that make a big difference to you? What about a couple of specs changing a little? And we talked a bit about that. And with that, you can probably cross off one of the 3, because you'll find out that it's really not as important. You may not get down to the one that's most important. So I like that. It's a way to break through some of the barriers that not getting the information that you need. And customers won't always tell you their pain point. We had a lovely discussion with Xavier yesterday at lunch. He gave some good examples, like where people are really interested in one feature and then they go off and buy the cheap thing, even though they put you through the pain point of wanting some particular set of things. And he had a good suggestion of something you can do. I like this one. I learned it yesterday. Start your discussion with the customers and say, what is your typical day? And if they describe spending hours on the software or an enormous amount of time not getting other people to talk to them or something, you'll get a better idea what their pain points are, even if they weren't the ones that they were going to volunteer. So MKS loves to have grand challenges, and this will be the first one for discussions. It's something we should all leave this room when we go home. You should know what the grand challenges are, not just what you want. And maybe they're different for metrology than they are for making optics, and maybe they're very different for some of the customers. But I thought I'd write down the ones that I like, and then you can all argue with me that I'm too biased, or you have a better grand challenge, or you like them. But hopefully it's something you want to take home. So, first one that I'm going to propose is going to the UV. And I was glad I heard that from NASA yesterday. I'll explain why I care as a customer. And the answer is a lot of the laser micromachining things we do work much better in the UV. We've gotten all of our lasers we build in the IR, we make green, we make UV. Even though maybe a third of the power can be converted from IR to UV, everybody buys UV lasers because the processing is more than 3 times faster, more than 3 times accurate. UV is really big. So for beam shaping and other sorts of things, I'm heavily invested in the UV. So I would propose that as one of the grand challenges. I'm glad at least 2 of us are interested in that one. And of course, you have to worry about MSF and things like that as we move to the UV, as well as coatings. This one you get to argue with me. This is a laser industry specific problem. We build 100 of this and 200 of that. I heard a lot about building 2 of something because we're going to put it up in space, and that's fabulous. I was a little scared when the smartest people on the planet took 2 years and made it only 6 months. That's so not what I need in terms of making 1 or 2. And I'm sorry, I could have updated the slides. 2,000 could be, we learned today, 200,000 can be high volume. But we also heard Simone talked about the valley of death in the middle. I think there's business to be had in the middle space and potentially replicated or other sorts of technologies where you don't pay a fortune. Maybe you don't have to test them all, but you need hundreds of things. And you're willing to pay a bit more than for the enormous quantity consumer things, but you're not willing to wait enormous amounts of time. And if you think about the optics industry, there's a lot of middle-sized companies. And I suspect I'm not alone here that I want hundreds of things. And so I think it's an area that's not fished out because it's not so easy. We know better how to do the 2 extremes. So I would propose that as a thing to go home and think about. And then it was rather clear, I learned this yesterday, in all emerging, new, exciting industries, there's lots of excitement and there's no standards. And standards are no fun. You don't really want to go to standards meetings and you don't want to argue. We had this discussion at lunch. I had coworkers who argued over how to measure the m squared of a beam for about a decade and then gave up. So standards are tough. But for instance, I heard all different ways of doing datums, and Bart said something that I resonated with. He said every time he came to the mechanical guys with new design, they had some better idea and they were going to try that the next time. And I have exactly that. It happens to me all the time. So I resonated. But that's not what you want in a more mature industry. I also heard that maybe we have to define MSF a bit better. What exactly is the frequency range? How are we going to measure things? If different people use different things, it's a chance to screw up communications. I think there might be some other ones. You probably know them all better. We talked about how to get different software packages to talk together. That requires standards. So maybe standards is the wrong word because that's scary and you don't want to go to standards meetings. You want to have best known practices, but you want the industry to have the same best known practices. So Joe reminded us yesterday that one of the ways to get an industry going is to have a world war. That's a terrible way to focus everybody, but it really accelerated progress. Killer apps, and I'm not thinking what goes on your phone, I'm thinking more broadly, is another way to bring focus, and it's a way to bring funding. In my life, in the laser business, the killer app that we're not doing enough about is quantum, because there's a lot of funding from the US government and all the other governments that are all competing to not get behind. And if we only had the right laser source, there's a lot of stuff to do. So that puts money in, and that helps focus everything. You also heard AI is a really big killer app. I don't think these are the free-form killer apps at all. AI is interesting because all the NVIDIA boards you have enormous amount of MKS content. So we're excited that the more AI there is and the more people buy stuff, we're going to make the chips, we're going to spec the chips, we're going to do the etching, we're going to keep the vacuum, we're going to do all that stuff. So other parts of my life, those are the right ones. I'm going to propose a couple killer apps, and then we're going to have you argue with me or come up with other ones. So certainly, after the last wonderful talk, AR, VR could be one of them, but only for a portion of our business. Automotive could be another one, and we heard that in fact there's stuff that's been in the automotive industry for decades, so maybe that one's fished out, or maybe not at all. And then we heard talk yesterday from ASML about lithography. We're very interested in that in the Newport part of our business, deep UV and EUV. And I want to have Jose help me either call on people, come up with other ideas, because knowing what's going to really drive stuff, even if it's just putting money in, that makes a big difference. That's more people you get to hire, that's more attention you can get, that's funding you can get from Congress. I think it's an important thing to at least have our vision on. So I'm very happy to cross something off my list. I told you at the beginning what my bias is, and the good news is Reinhard has already got a comment. Excellent.
We want to know from all of you what are your grand challenges and what are your dream killer apps for this industry. Reinhard.
So I guess you can skip lithography because these mirrors for EUV, they are pushing atoms away with ion beam finishing. Nobody can do a surface better than what they do for these mirrors. If they want to do free form, they will not come to ask us, so we just do it. But actually, as I know, these mirrors are not free form, or at least as I know. But put it off the list because this is already so implemented and we cannot contribute.
I think you're right. I would argue that there's a whole bunch of other subsystems in an EUV system. There's all kinds of monitoring, there's keeping temperatures straight, there's getting registration and everything correctly. Thank goodness, because I don't work for Zeiss, but there's still a bunch of optics business to be had.
We still prefer to wire for these guys, and it's all done. These systems are out. So even the high NA is shipped to Intel, so it's developed. It's there is, yeah, it happens. It's like freeform in a car.
I take your input. My argument is there'll be another generation, and the pull from everybody needing more phones and more devices is not going away anytime soon.
Can I comment on that?
Please.
Yes.
We're at the moment working on new free-form optical systems for ASML. Sorry.
But another comment. So what happens is the Chinese will make new kind of microchips which do not need all these high-end systems. And you should just think about that the fastest computers today, they're based on GPUs. Who would ever expected that the fastest computer today is only 1 meter long and 20 centimeters high and not using all these high-end chips? So I would think that the semiconductor industry, by pushing China out of our world, will create completely new kind of chipsets which are not manufactured with the next generation after smaller, so that this will change the world. But that is a big bet. There will be no free form for this new kind of chips.
I might add a third point to bring in to that, to maybe also address that, or second point to address that one as well. So the 2 versus 2000 I thought was a really interesting perspective. And I would agree with that, at least from like a lot of prototype work. Yeah, I mean, we need to move that in that direction. And then it's a bit of a dead end, where like we can see maybe a long-term goal, but then we need to figure out how to bridge the gap there. So I would agree with that. And then also to address the point about UV and DUV and lithography applications, maybe we're basing that on the assumption that there's one big player and that's how it's always going to be. You know, there's other maybe lower precision applications that you could do at bigger scale of instruments, and maybe that's going to be part of the future. Not to say that our big players are going to go away, but that we need to think about new architectures for lithography, even for things like metasurfaces if they hit, or things like other electronics applications that don't require the things that NVIDIA does.
Yes.
Two comments. I guess I'll stick with that theme first, but sort of matches the second theme, right? So there's a lot of things that are cool and interesting and scientifically wow, but not all of them make money, right? So I think from a perspective of what is the right volume point, what is the right technology advancement, which ultimately can result in these sort of mid-market volumes and mid-market places for businesses to work where it's reasonably profitable. That's an interesting question, right? That we don't always ask when we talk about cool things. And so certainly in the automotive and in the commercial space, it's the ultimate product, which sometimes is where you get the money, but the pieces in between, you know, $1 optics, most people aren't super interested in. Second part about EUV is it's the same as it's always been, which is the reasonable in between volumes come from the inspection systems, not with steppers.
Yeah.
Right. So think about that. I mean, there are a lot of microscopes that now have to be developed that work at actinic wavelengths. Right. They work at the wavelength of the steppers, which means different types of light sources, higher quantity, lower powers. They don't have to be the 400 watt EUV generators that sit in the steppers. So that's a whole different world that I think this whole group can participate in as well.
Have a lot more questions, so you will have a chance to speak.
So my name is John Swanton with 4D Technologies. So we also do interferometry and in situ measurements for optics. Having said that, we were a private company. We were bought by Nanometrics, who then merged with Rudolph Technologies, and now we're on to innovation. But what they do as a parent company, though, is they do metrology for lithography. So a lot of the systems that ASML are buying, et cetera, so those are places that freeform optics could certainly play a part in, would be the metrology for the actual lithography that's going on as well.
In an event like this one, because the first time that you had the microphone on you, in an event like this one, it's very easy to take points out. Can you dream away what would be like one or two applications you would like to say this could be the money makers?
Are you talking about for freeform optics? Well, from my company's perspective, it would be in situ measurements of these particular things. I think he said it today, right? Ion beam. The ability to take an interferometer and put it on a robot and have it measure things in situ. So bringing the instrument to the tool rather than a tool, or the optical, rather than the optical tool is certainly something that we've been doing for 3-4 years now with nanocams and stuff. How we could use freeform optics, we make other instruments out of other than interferometers for measuring metal parts and aircraft and stuff. So unique designs and challenges in there could certainly use freeform optics.
Oliver wants to speak. When Oliver wants to speak, I want to listen.
You said we discuss and we add something. I want to add something.
Please.
Things have been getting complicated. And we can only cope with this complicated technology, which is highly diverse, with nerds, with really deep understanding of a very narrow piece of technology. And how did we come here out of the jungle through the savannah to Rochester? And how did we survive in this bad weather? Okay. The answer is we've been a lot of people. and we communicated. And we beaten the lions being more communicative. And maybe we should rediscover the social competence of a human being as a rod, communicate. So when even to take your optical designer, although you said you never used that. So if you take two optical designers, a highly expert in illumination and in imaging, if they're very narrow, close to each other, I guess they have problems. They have to, like a submarine, get to the surface to more shallow waters in terms of complicated technology to communicate. What would happen if somebody would come up with communication, that language, whatever you might call that enables those two submarines to discuss very in deep water. That would thrill everything. But we cannot. I have to go up. I know everything about polishing, and I have to go up to talk to somebody who knows everything about grinding, although grinding and polishing is almost the same. So let's communicate in deep waters. That's what I would like to add. Sorry for talking so long.
No, I think it clearly goes on the grand challenges. It's the segue to the last slide. Do we want to go there, or?
I would like to stay just for one more minute on the grand challenges.
We will come back. That's great.
Yes. Who has more grand challenges to share with the room? For me, it was quite clear, in my opinion, that the highlight was when they were said designers have to speak to the metrology companies. And then later on, Barry Silverstein, he said, material people are rarely in connection with the optics community. And I think those two are something that we need to explore. We have people from Savvy Kingdom. You can hear with fantastic XTEM and ULTEM material, and you can hear looking for applications, looking for integrators, looking for new ideas. What is, in your opinion, the current status of the ecosystem? Is it easy for you to connect with the end user and to provide your material with the refractive index and temperature stability that you have?
Yeah, so the problem that we have is that plastic is kind of an outsider in this industry. So we'll talk about glass, ceramics, metal. But when I look at plastic, I mean, we're talking about diamond turning and all those things. You don't need that. Because plastic can be molded. So I think that there is, and from our side, I think we also don't understand what really are the problems that can be solved through plastics. Yeah. So it's a two-way communication. I agree with him on the communication side, because unless we have that communication, how would we know what we need to develop, right? And you guys, the industry knows the problem. We need to understand the problems, and so that we can help. And it's just not ULTEM, XTEM. I think we can really bring a family of materials.
And Robert?
Of slide operations. Just a step back. What is a killer app? And we are in the first world. And so for us, we need killer apps that fit a certain economic return. So we look at space and other things. They're extremely expensive to pay for high salaries, cost of living, all these things. So for us, the killer app, if we're thinking Europe, the United States, but primarily the people here are from, we have to, first off, it's like the old Venn diagram, okay, it's got to first off have a certain economic value. Second, you need to have a certain level of volume production to produce enough volume of money. So you have to look at, if it's 2, it could be a satellite. If it's 2,000, it might be some specific instrument for a specific industry or something, like maybe medical, very directed. So we need to be thinking not just what's cool, what about automobiles? Well, maybe automobiles are fine, but the cameras they're doing are $5. We're not going to do $1 billion $5 cameras to pay for our industry. We need something that within the volume that your company, your capabilities are, brings in enough cash to pay for your business. So it's a difficult problem to really find a killer app, and it takes a lot of thought. And so I'm not saying I know the killer app, but we should be thinking in terms of what parameters are that we're looking for.
Basically, he's saying that they're going to charge you a lot of money for these 100 optics. I have one more question there.
Patrick is saying from I think that we're missing something, which is, and when I see, fortunately, we have people talking, helping each other, that we are between ourselves, or boys. And I think that in any market, any business, you need the market first. And here, what I've seen is, do you need this? Do you need that? Trying to find a market for something. And I think that we should change the paradigm and thinking of, just like for a cell phone in the beginning. I want to have a wireless phone like I have in my car. I had one in the 90s, like that. It didn't matter if it was, could have, I don't know, maybe 3 kilometers coverage, something like that, but you had use for that. And after that, the cell phone, went away. And I think that that's what we are missing here. It's more like, what can you do with my stuff? And I think that's maybe not the right way to think.
You said that we need more like the end users telling us this is what I need.
Customer first, whoever is the customer. And don't try to tell him what he needs. But he is ready to work with, new technologies which are emerging, not very efficient, but they see a path, they see a use case. Here what I've seen is, well, guys, I would like you to use this because it would be a business for me. And that's fine, we are all here for that. But I think
I agree.
That's maybe the problem we have, because we have a problem.
How do we solve it?
Yeah, kind of combining the last two, right? We're a first world country. What problem are we solving? Like, these problems are not really problems. Like, no offense to Meta, I don't want to strap a camera to my face and wear ever. Like, it's just not a problem. What's a problem? Energy, right? Everything's getting electrified. We need energy for it. There's not enough energy in our grid to support the energy demands that our government is forcing upon us. Can we use optics? Can we use freeforms to deliver energy more efficiently? Can we eliminate some of the loss in the grid with freeforms? I don't know. There are a lot of problems that we talked about the last 2 days, but I don't know that most of society would really view those as a problem.
We just came from, some of us came from OFC last week, and we are making internet faster and faster. We can buy groceries, order from Amazon, and delivering our home anywhere we want, and we don't get regularly scammed for cancer. This is the kind of world we're living, and ultimately the problem is that we need more guidance of governments telling us which are the key issues to solve and funding them properly. Good that it's recorded. We have maybe a question in the room. Point.
I was just going to make a plug for one of the Optica programs where we actually give people $10,000 in other countries to work on big problems, and clean water is one of the ones that's up there with energy. And I don't know where we fit, but that's clearly a world problem, and at least Optica's putting a little cash on the table.
No, I was just going to make a comment on your following slide about that mid-range volume. I find it kind of humorous because my entire career has been in that mid-range volume. So you look at newer technology, where does it add value? I look at my company, we do biomedical products, we do commercial aviation products, we do government products. All of those are in that mid-volume challenge. And by the way, we pay a lot of money. So when you're trying to develop new technologies, that mid-volume challenge may be where you want to start before you decide where are you going to put all your money for the high volume applications.
But that's great. I thought I was the only one who spent his whole career in the mid volume.
Jim, send us off the way that we deserve. Telling us what are your conclusions.
Okay.
Oh, we have one more comment.
Okay.
Just a quick comment. I want to thank everybody for what they've shared with us these past 2 days. The comment about we're talking about things that maybe don't matter. I think it does matter. We can educate our customers on what we can do and how they might think about things differently. We were spherical optics, then we were A-spheres, now we have other options.
Thank you very much.
So final thoughts. Thank you, Nick, again for conversations at lunch and at dinner. And we danced around this one a bit, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to give you my biased answers so you can either shoot them down or add other ones. How do we work better together as an industry, meaning the ecosystem that we have here? And Jose's done a good job saying that why don't the material people get to have a seat at the table? Why are the metallurgy people not fully integrating what we're doing? So clearly, there's opportunities to work better together. And I know of two ways that things are being done that I've seen. And you can't have them, but I'll at least tell you what they are as a model. One is that there's funding in Europe for industry academic consortiums where the industry gets money to work on things. And a lot of it has to get published. Some of the IP is controlled. And there would be, for instance, one software person, one customer, one university, and so on. We don't really have that here. Here, it's more likely that the university will come and say to industry, could you please give me something? And so that's a very different model for doing things. We are not, as a group, going to change how the US government is handing out money, but it is a difference. And the other one is watching the semiconductor industry, because MKS is heavily invested in all of that. They have roadmaps that are 10 years out, and people are willing to work 10 years out together, figuring I'll beat you in 4 years. When it really comes down to it, let's do the non-competitive stuff. We don't have that in our industry. We're not looking that far out. And so everybody's worried that their competitor is going to eat their lunch next year. And so they're not really willing to work together. So here's a couple of models where other people work better together, but I don't see them applying. So here's some possible other thoughts for you to either agree or not. SBIRs occur in our field. Should we be targeting them differently? Should we be making the government put their money in a different place in terms of how people work together? Maybe we can have some impact. Those are programs that exist. We have the Center for Freeform Optics. Thank you, Yannick. Should they be doing something different than what they're already doing, which is at least getting people together? And I'm sure if you make suggestions and they're doable, there's open ears over here. And then, of course, the closing point is what can Optica do to help with any of this? If there are ways to communicate. One proposal from Nick was, can people actually put in all their needs and then a third party doesn't tell you who it's coming from? And so there can be some collection of what needs are without you having to tell everybody what it is you want. I'm not sure that actually works, but it would be nice because almost everybody's talk ended with, what can you do for me? What can I do for you? It was, please bring me your challenges. That shows we don't really work together well enough and we don't know enough about the voice of the customer. So maybe that's the right place to end for the tour. But if you have anything on the very last point, what Optica can do to make us all work better together, all of us are all ears. Thanks.
I would like to add to that we are starting working on this. For those of you, and I hope many of you are going to be in Switzerland on the 25th and 26th of June at the facilities of Focuslight Switzerland, we're already working on putting together the MOU for advanced manufacturing of optics. Not only freeforms, but advanced manufacturing technologies for optics. All of you who are corporate members, you will get eventually the draft for giving us input and what we can do to communicate between the supply chain, but also to communicate to the potential end users in the different markets. I hope I can see you in Switzerland, but definitely I also hope that you can give us input on those drafts for MOUs that will be distributed with all of you. That's one. And the second one, this meeting has been, in my opinion, spectacular. I had really high hopes. I had gone beyond that. And we couldn't have done that without you. So I would like to give, from the Optica staff, a huge round of applause to the best audience that I could imagine for this meeting. And now that we give thanks, I think we need to all thank our host. Optimax has made a spectacular room for us to network, and they're going to give us a little bit of a fantastic show. Joe Spielman and your entire team, thank you very much for having us. Let me thank the Optica team, the people that stayed in Washington, D.C., but also the people here, Dr. Helena Diaz, Alicia Jensen, and of course, Dr. Olga Ras. Thank you.
We see a brighter tomorrow, where innovation is not hindered by sorrow. Let's assemble our forces. June 25th.